Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Friday Ramblings, and we're here to discuss something that is definitely nostalgic for your host with the most ramblings, that is. And that is the 1980s G.I. Joe cartoons. We had previously reviewed the G.I. Joe movie, which was essentially the epilogue to the G.I. Joe first cartoon series. Originally, it had been meant to set up a season 3, but the license was transferred to a different animation studio. These things happen. Which, of course, meant that the film had a similarity to the Transformers movie, which set up season 3, much like the G.I. Joe film was. And as we discussed there, things done in the Transformers film that the audience didn't react politely to impacted the G.I. Joe film. Please go watch that video if you would like to hear me discuss that. However, we're going to discuss the cartoon that came before it and the one that came after it, due to, as I said, the licensing jumping, in a quick little nugget fashion, just enough to get you intrigued, because the good news is, between streaming and DVD releases, you can access these classic series as is. So let's start from the top. G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, retitled Action Force in the United Kingdom, was a half-hour American animated television series created by Ron Friedman. Based on the pre-existing toy line from Hasbro, the cartoon ran in syndication from 1983 to 1986, and 95 episodes were produced. Now, it's important to note that although the series was running concurrent with the Marvel comic, due to the fact that the cartoon series had to meet network television standards for what is appropriate content for children, while they both pulled from the same continuity of Hasbro toy lines, the comics were given more freedom to develop characters who were not part of the toy line, and as such had a little more creative freedom. Also, because they weren't held back by FCC standards, the comics were a little more reality-based in the use of weaponry and the fact that characters could get seriously injured and even killed. The cartoon did none of that. Nobody was ever seriously harmed, and in fact, it created in years later, when people started viewing the cartoons in more of a tongue-in-cheek manner, little memes about how, hey, it doesn't matter how spontaneous and surprising this ship exploding is, everybody parachutes to safety, yay! Everybody can swim to shore, yay! Everybody jumps out of the vehicle at the last second and safely tucks and rolls, yay! Now don't get me wrong, look, when I was a little kid, I loved the cartoon, I didn't care about that aspect, I just enjoyed the show for what it was, and that's the point. Although, yes, you can watch the show as an adult and chuckle and laugh at the lack of consequences, despite this being a specialized military unit using army-grade weaponry, even if it is somewhat sci-fi in nature, because again, those FCC standards. Fighting a terrorist organization trying to conquer the world, and therefore should not be opposed to brutally maiming or killing its opposition. Everybody ends up nice in the end. So, let's get into the nitty-gritty. The main producers of the series was Marvel Productions, although they did work alongside Sunbow Productions, as Sunbow's staff would write the scripts based on the character and vehicle designs provided by Hasbro. The artists at Marvel Productions would draw storyboards based on the scripts and record the voiceovers. And the animation itself was outsourced to Toei Animation in Japan, who worked on all 95 episodes as well as the movie. So you really had 3 different production companies working on the different aspects of the show based on what their specialties were. That's how things worked back then. Now, we will probably talk about Toei Animation, Sunbow, and Marvel in general in different videos, saluting them and the various things that they worked on over the years. So consider this a little sneak preview. The show, despite not being able to have a lot of on-screen violence, was allowed to make references to off-screen casualties, as a term could be used interchangeably for injuries and deaths. A particular episode in Season 1, the Joes are transported to an alternate universe where the Joes have been defeated by Cobra, features a scene in which 3 members of the Joe team find the skeletal remains of their counterparts from that world. Also, let's go ahead and throw this out here. The biggest thing that the G.I. Joe cartoon is remembered for is the public service announcements. These ended every show and helped fill the educational requirement nature of the G.I. Joe cartoon. Basically, you would have some kids doing something potentially harmful. A random Joe would step in to explain to them this is not great behavior to do, and as such they should not do that and do, various other little activities instead, ending with the classic tagline as the kids proclaim, "Now we know!" The Joe responding, "And knowing is half the battle." Again, things we didn't mind as a kid because, hey, it's better than inserting these kind of morals in the middle of the story. Let's just have our action where we like it. Well, that being said, let's break down a few of the episodes. The kind of highlight things. The series itself started with 2 miniseries as is, that were folded into, when it came time to air reruns as part of the syndication package, into the general episode count, and thus are considered the first 10 episodes of the series. The first 5 are referred to as the mass device, and shows the Joes and Cobra competing over this self-titled weapon that Cobra wants to launch as part of their world domination schemes. Now, this is one of the interesting things about the show. It came in off and running. Cobra already existed. They were a known threat to the Joes. G.I. Joe was already established. This was not a show that spent time dealing with big origins. They had a large pool of characters. They went straight into the concept from the get-go. Off and running quick. No, we're going to start with 2 or 3 characters on each side, show the origins of the Cobra organization, show the Joe team being put together. No, they went right in there and got to the action because that's what people want. They don't want a bunch of exposition and a bunch of government paperwork establishing things. No. We get it. We had a theme song explaining the basics. A real American hero, G.I. Joe is there. That's it. The theme song explained it. We didn't need the rest. We don't need origin episodes. Let's get to the action. Mass device. Yeah. Second story arc is known as The Revenge of Cobra, and involves Cobra trying to steal a high-powered experimental laser, leading to the reveal of a greater weapon, the Weather Dominator, your classic control the weather machine. A lot of shenanigans happens, takes 5 episodes. It's all good fun. After that, the series itself would start proper as, again, these minis were done. One was done in 83, one was done in 84. The official series did not start until 85 with The Pyramid of Darkness, another 5-parter. So in essence, a third miniseries. Wow, I mean, that's, 15 episodes. That's, for modern streaming services, like a whole season right there. That's just 3 story arcs. Kind of anime-esque almost. Ooh. Well, Toei of Japan was involved, even if they just did the animation. Ooh, am I being snarky? Am I trying to lay out conspiracy theories? You'll never know. But yes, the Pyramid of Darkness, which basically is Cobra trying to create a super base / weapon to make everything grand. After that, starting with episode 16 in total, or 6 of the series proper, we get into the good old-fashioned one-and-dones. Often showing Cobra setting up false businesses in order to brainwash people, or just plain get money to fund various super weapons, and G.I. Joe has to expose them. And one of the interesting things about the series was, because it was the 1980s, we had different standards what children could be exposed to. There were a couple episodes that, had some content that felt like it was a little more for the older children. There were episodes where you would see various female characters, both Joes. In the case of Cobra, they did have the Baroness and Zorana in skimpier clothing than they wore in standard episodes. You would have hints with various female characters, because on the Joes, you had CoverGirl, you had Lady J, you had Scarlet, not to mention various civilian characters who were introduced as friends of different Joes or even relatives that they would get hit on. They would be rocking some fashionable outfits that might show some cartoon cleavage. It was all a thing. Now, it wasn't constant and heavy-handed, but for people that aren't prepared for it, some of these episodes do sneak up on you, where it's like, okay, wow, we're just gonna have some of that in this episode. All right. But still, they did have time to do a couple 2-parters, such as the Synthoid Conspiracy, as well as touch on the supernatural, like the Phantom Brigade, as basically everything was fair game in the G.I. Joe cartoon. Super science, crazy weaponry, check. Mystical element, check. Crazy ninja action, check. The aforementioned 80 standard PG fan service, check. And when it's all said and done, as we said, we managed 95 episodes, including a few that were, as I said, more of a classic, just having fun thing, such as The Viper is Coming. Season 1 ended with the 2-parter, There's No Place Like Springfield, which, frankly, kind of messed with my head as a child. The basics of it, and again, I'm trying to be as spoiler minimal as possible. A group of Joes are trying to expose a Cobra scheme in order for the scientist that they are rescuing to keep his formula that could be converted into a weapon safe. He implants the formula into Shipwreck's brain. Shipwreck passes out during this and wakes up, allegedly it being 6 years later, out of a coma, in a place called Springfield, which is very familiar to fans of the comic books, now possessing a wife and daughter. It claims that G.I. Joe won their war against Cobra. However, nobody can tell him exactly why and how. Part 2 picks up with Shipwreck trying to put things together, including having various nightmares and people being not what it looks like. The whole idea of, false memories, false people, and just plain seeing Shipwreck having to act out a nervous breakdown as his brain tries to rebel against information that he can't believe. It was pretty intense for a small child. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you. If you're watching this with your little child, with your youngest children, you might want to, be a little prepared for this episode to, border right there on some, suspenseful, psychological terror type stuff. Not going to say that the episodes that in and of itself gave me nightmares as a kid, but I definitely always remembered those episodes. In the back of my mind is like, yeah, that was the time G.I. Joe got a little, right there at the line of what, I could handle at that age. Still, Season 2 came in and brought us the creation of Serpentor, a new leader for Cobra in another 5-part story arc. They loved those story arcs. Now, by this point, Season 2, Episode 1 was Episode 66. That's right, Season 1 lasted 55 episodes, not counting the 2 mini-series that were essentially prologues to the series proper. But still, over half the series' length was in Season 1. Still, there were a lot of interesting episodes coming forth, including episodes centering around the infamous G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, the USS Montana, and a meta joke involved when a particular vague item needs to be retrieved that is flat out called the MacGuffin device. If you don't know what MacGuffin means in writing terms, go look it up. It makes the meta joke pretty obvious. We also have episodes centering around evil telethons and more models and fan servicey episodes, including the infamous gray hairs and growing pains, where characters are both aged into senior citizen AARP aging or reduced to childhood. This episode is partially infamous for the fact that one particular female Joe, after being reduced to a child, finds problems keeping track of her sweatpants. Which is all well and good, because her sweatshirt was nice and long when she was a child, but the tongue-in-cheek joke episode at the end, when she's restored to natural adulthood, involves her refusing to emerge from the chamber in which she was restored to her proper age until somebody fetched her a replacement pair of pants. Ha ha ha! Dress code violations. The whole thing ends with an episode that, as I said, because it was intended to just be a season finale, as they assumed they would get the rights to a third season after making the movie, it's not as big a deal. It's a one-off, as I had in season 1. Into Your Tent I Will Silently Creep is thus the official final episode of the original series. All this leads into, as I said, the post-movie 1989 series, which was produced instead by DIC Enterprises. Dig. I know, I'm trying not to be, tee-hee, but I mean, that's how they say it. Dig. It's not my fault. I didn't name the company. Okay, now we've all had our moment to giggle. This series set things up with another good old-fashioned 5-episode miniseries, Operation Dragonfire, which sees the post-movie continuity. They did acknowledge continuity of the movie, interesting enough, despite this being different in production studio. I guess to give casual fans the impression that it was still all being done by the same crew in one giant series, where the no longer human Cobra Commander seeks to get his physicality restored and get revenge on Serpentor. After this, we get the start of the regular series proper, which followed the same basic formula as the original series and brings up the fact that, as I said, to the casual fan, you would almost think this was all one giant series by the same crew, except for a little bit of tweaks to the animation style and a couple VA switches. Infamous episodes include the 2-part Victory at Volcania, the No Zone Conspiracy, Night of the Creepers, 2-part D-Day at Alcatraz, Kindergarten Commandos, Messenger from the Deep, where we get into the good old Atlantis parallels, Shadow of a Doubt, Keyboard Warriors, tongue-in-cheek Metalheads Reunion, and the last 2 episodes are actually, interesting enough, basically cop-outs. The last official full new episode was Metalheads Reunion. The last 2 episodes were Basic Training, which was a recap episode showing clips from Season 1 and 2, focusing on the life of a G.I. Joe, hosted by team leader Hawk, and Series 2 standout Metalhead, getting a recap episode detailing his various shenanigans in the series. So, yeah, while I do like a lot of the episodes from the second series, it did kind of limp to a finale. Still, they got a total of 44 episodes across 2 seasons. And when combined with the original series run, it means you have 139 episodes plus a theatrical movie. Not a bad run for an 80s series that essentially was 2 series by 2 different production companies, but frankly, back then, if you could get a cartoon to last you more than 100 episodes, you were doing something good. You know, entertainment was pretty cheap, especially when it's all said and done, it all came back to being glorified advertisements for toys. Still, For anybody that is interested in the G.I. Joe meta franchise, the cartoons, at least select episodes, are required viewing. Along with the Marvel comic books, it cemented G.I. Joe as a permanent place of American pop culture and spawned a legend that has continued to be refreshed as Hasbro is trying to chase that high over and over again. I may do a video in the future discussing the other shorter lasting animated attempts to revive the Joe franchise. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Still, if you can find it on your favorite streaming service or you see the DVDs for cheap at your favorite DVD procuring place, a little alliteration, procuring a place, feel free to pick them up and give them a view. It's fun for all ages. Yes, it is a little bit dated, but you know what? You're talking about something almost as old as I am. You're talking about a franchise that its start was 40 years ago. That means, yeah, the animation's going to look a little dated. There's nothing wrong with that, though. That's what makes it feel classic. So with that in mind, I'm going to let y'all go, but I'll be back in 7 for another rambling because, hey, how else are you going to know about all this great entertainment? Knowing is half the battle.